I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friend, Amy, and I, both females, would spend many days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the quiet. One afternoon in March 2010, we were traveling from Ruidoso to Albuquerque, always up for exploring. We took a back road rather than traveling the more direct highway. One leg of our journey had us on NM 55. It's a remote, teeny-tiny 2-lane highway. We love those type of roads, up until that day. This part of New Mexico is flat, and a desolate desert. You can see for miles, and there is virtually nothing except dirt and rock between towns, and towns can be miles apart. So we were on NM 55 going north. After a few minutes, we saw a white pickup truck up ahead of us going in the same direction. Suddenly we stopped. And then he stopped, his truck sideways in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from him as we got closer. We began to get uneasy. We could see no reason for him to do this. We were the only other vehicle out there, and we began wondering if we should turn around and rather than come up on him and have to stop. We were about a half a mile away from him when he pulled over to the opposite side of the highway, but his truck was still pointed the direction we were going. We tried to relax a little. Surely this guy has a ranch or something. Maybe he was checking something on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. One, there was only one person in a truck, a middle-aged guy who never took his eyes off us. Two, he was talking into a walkie-talkie. A few seconds after we passed him, he pulled back onto the highway and started to follow us. But he never got too close. He would get to within a few car lengths and then drop back a little, then speed back up again to within a few car lengths. We were getting nervous. We realized how alone we really were. We had seen no other traffic on the road, and we hadn't told anyone about our great idea to take this detour. We checked our cell phones and neither one had a signal, typical for remote New Mexico, but scary given our present situation. Amy was driving and speeding up, while I frantically checked the map, hoping to find a road that had way more traffic. There was no other road. We had to travel this one to get to the next town, Mountain there. Turning around to go back the other way didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. He was going very, very slowly, maybe 20 miles an hour, if that. This pickup was old and beat up, whereas the one behind us was newer. Amy has us up to 70 miles an hour, which was typical for us on the 55-mile-an-hour highways, and we blew by the old pickup. As we passed it, we saw it was another middle-aged guy. He was talking into a walkie-talkie as well. After the white pickup passed him, he pulled a U-turn and pulled in behind it. After we continued to watch, we could see the white pickup truck guy talking into his walkie-talkie. No doubt these two knew each other. We were being deliberately followed, and for the first and only time in my life, I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road. We truly thought old beat-up pickup guy had us set up a trap in the road and our vehicle would be disabled somehow. We were talking about driving into the fields. We were in an SUV, but this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we went off the road and got cornered, so we stayed on the highway. By now, the white pickup truck guy was right on top of us. We could see him talking into the walkie-talkie, and he stayed right on our bumper. An old beat-up pickup truck guy was right on top of him. The three of us sped down the highway. The white pickup inched closer. He was trying to bump us. I watched helplessly as he got to within inches of our back bumper. Amy floored it. We were passing 80 miles an hour and edging up to 90 miles. The road was flat and deserted, but a little thing going wrong would have been claustrophobic. We absolutely were not going to slow down or stop if we could help it. The white pickup pulled into the opposite lane and started to gain speed. The only thing we could think of was that he wanted to pass us and get in front of us. If he got in front of us and his buddy was behind us, then we'd been boxed in and trapped. We looked frantically at the rocky desert on both sides of us. Our only option was to off-road it. Should we risk it? Could we speed through the desert and make it to safety in one piece? As we topped a small incline, we saw a sign that said Salinas Pueblos Mission National Monument, and it pointed towards a road on the left. And right at that moment, a blue pickup truck pulled out of the road and onto the highway in front of us. As we came up to the blue pickup, we saw the plate said U.S. Park Service. We looked at each other, then looked behind us. Both pickup trucks did U-turns and went the other way. We followed the blue pickup to Mountain Air, and then made our way to Albuquerque. I don't know exactly what those guys' intentions were, but they weren't good. There's something seriously wrong out there. I notified the state police, and they said they would keep an eye on things and have a few cars on that road. The area is very near Belen, New Mexico, which is where Tara Kalisa was abducted. It's about 100 miles from Elephant Butte, New Mexico, which is where David Parker Ray had his little secret torture laboratory. We didn't pull all that out until later. Even though David Parker Ray had died by the time this happened to us, we do believe there are others like him out there, and whoever abducted Tara has never been caught. Or maybe we came into meth lab territory, but since this happened on an actual highway rather than a backroad country, I tend to discount the meth lab theory. Whatever is going on out there, it's not good. So, let's never meet, or have anyone else meet these guys. Okay, here's my story. I lurk here all the time. I read this subreddit quite a bit. I thought a lot about submitting my own experience, and now I finally am. In retrospect, things turned out fine, but it was alarming for me at the time. I grew up in an extremely rural Midwestern state. My family lived in the country between two small towns. I had attended school in both small towns and knew most of the families in the area. One night, it was about 10 or 11. I was leaving a high school basketball game in Town A. I was around 15 and driving on my school permit past curfew. I had borrowed my uncle's car, and an early 90s Toyota with a leak in the gas. That caused me to run out of gas before I made it more than 5 or 6 miles out of town. I had about 7 left to go. I was on a long stretch of road that served as a shortcut between two main highways in the towns. There were a few houses, but they were stretched far apart, and at the time, as well as to this day, cell phone reception was very spotty. I waited a while, and finally a nice, newer red truck with an extended cab, a toolbox in the back, and a construction company logo on the side pulled up. It was Friday or Saturday night, and there was a man inside with a woman and 2 girls. He offered me his phone. I remember noticing it was a track phone, which my friends and I at the time referred to as crack phones because you can't trace the owners, and they are frequently used by drug addicts. They're also used by a lot of people who can't afford a standard phone plan, but the family was driving a really nice vehicle, so they seemed super clean cut, so this struck me as odd. The phone got no reception. I tried calling my parents a few times and finally gave up. The truck had been headed away from Town B towards Town A, where I had just come from, so when they offered me a ride, I thought nothing of it. I had a gas can in the trunk, and all my friends lived in Town A, so I figured they could drop me off at the gas station on their way to their destination, and I could find a ride back with somebody I knew. When I got in the car, I was caught off guard by the way the woman, who I assumed was his wife, and the 2 girls, who I assumed were their children, were dressed. Conservative family, even Amish, aren't uncommon from where I'm from, but the man, being otherwise modern, wearing jeans, driving a sort of flashy truck, and owning a cell phone, the female's clothing surprised me. They all wore long, heavy skirts with button-up blouses and thin bonnets on their heads. One of the girls seemed to have a disability and made grunting noises every so often. Other than her noises, the women were completely silent. Everything seemed fine to me until the man driving turned around and started driving the opposite way of the direction he had been driving. The closest town the other way was still 15 or more miles, and it seemed out of his way. Out of politeness, I reminded him that I had come from Town A. Knew everyone there and could find a ride home. It was late, and I figured he needed to get his family where they were going. That's when he told me he was from Town B and that he had a full gas can waiting at his house, that he would take me there and bring me back to my car to fill it up. Still trying to be polite, I told him that was okay, and my house was on the way to Town B, just a few miles away, and he could drop me off there. He didn't reply. I started to feel like something was off. I'm from the area where people go out of their way to help others, but it seemed like too much. I had insisted numerous times that it was totally okay and that he could then just drop me off at home. Or if he wanted to make sure I made it home fine, he could drop me off there, of course. In my uneasiness, I started making small talk. I asked him his name, and his last name was unfamiliar to me, which was surprising but not totally unbelievable. Coming from a town of around 3,000 people, where I spent the first decade of my life and where both my parents still worked, I remember wishing that I had paid attention to the construction company name on the side of the truck, since most companies in my area were named after a family. As we got closer to turn off to my house, I started to get more frantic. I realized that these people, who didn't even seem overly friendly, were insisting that we drive completely out of the way, late at night, in a rural community, to fix a fairly common mishap. I had no idea who they were. I had never seen them before. I had no cell phone reception, and their cell phone was undetectable. Even if it wasn't, what were they trying to do? Making me disappear would be a pretty easy task. I started kind of shrieking, and they dropped me off at my house, but nobody in the car seemed like they heard me. Finally, in a fit of panic, I screamed at the top of my voice, "This is my turn. Take me home. Please take me home right now." Finally, for the first time, the wife spoke up, yelling at the man angrily, and somewhat annoyed. "Just fucking take her home." Outside of the girl's grunting, the car fell silent. He swerved angrily on the road, pulled into my driveway, let me out, and then reversed out of the driveway so fast that the tires spit gravel. I couldn't even see the license plate or the name of the company through the dust. I ran inside and woke up my parents to tell them what had happened. They just yelled at me because I was driving past curfew. I don't know for sure what their intentions were, and maybe they just wanted to help, but I felt really uneasy the whole time. Not as scary as some stuff on here, but that's my experience. This is a story my grandmother would tell me when she was trying to put the fear of God in me. When she was about 28, she went to a major city for a business meeting. I can't remember the specific city, but it was like New York with a huge amount of taxis and whatnot. She was supposed to meet someone at another destination and had the hotel call a taxi. When she went outside to wait, she saw a taxi already outside. She assumed it was hers and helped herself in. She didn't notice anything special about the taxi. She told the driver the address and off they went. For about 10 minutes, she didn't notice they were going in a weird way. After 15 minutes, she started getting worried and asked the driver where they were going. At this point, they were out of the major city, and she realized what kind of situation she was in. She tried talking to the driver, but he never spoke a word to her. She noticed they were getting closer to a hotel, so she made a decision. She had to in this situation. She noticed he never locked the doors, probably thinking she wouldn't jump out of a moving car. He didn't know my grandmother was a badass motherfucker who took care of 5 kids on her own and worked full time. She tucked her legs, opened the door, and rolled the fuck out. She ran as fast as she could and hid. She saw him go up and down the road a couple of times and eventually leave. When he finally left, she walked down the road to another hotel. She walked in and asked to use their phone. They actually said no. Then she demanded to use their phone in the same voice she uses now to make sure I know she's serious. Yeah, they let her use the phone. She called whoever she was supposed to meet and told them where she was and to bring the police. They came, she filled out a report, and left. The aftermath is the police raided the hotel and found it a house that kidnapped women who were forced to prostitute themselves. She told her friend that she wanted to cut the job short and go home. He told her, "You're not the type of woman to let getting kidnapped mess with your life." So she stayed in the same city she was kidnapped in and finished her work. I love my grandma.